Hello and welcome back to yet another episode of On the Grid Podcast, Season 5, Episode 13. We are reviewing the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix that happened last weekend that saw Oscar Piastri take the championship lead for the first time, and the first time an Australian driver has taken the championship lead since 2010, since Mark Webber. Back in his Red Bull days. But I'm your host, Adrian. Joining me, as ever, is my co-host, Ethan Evans. Ethan, what did you make of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix? Now we've got a bit of a break now as well on our hands. Are you ready to kind of dissect what happened in the sandy dunes of Jeddah?
Yeah, it wasn't as bad as some of the races this season, but it wasn't exactly Bahrain, was it? It was an all right. I'd say it's a very average Grand Prix.
Yeah, as most people would say, I'd probably rate this as probably like a 7 or a 6 or a 7 out of 10. The only real action was at the front of the controversy between Verstappen and Piastri, but we'll get onto that a little bit later on. And let's actually begin with Q1. And at the forefront of the top three was Verstappen, who set the quickest time of the session, followed by Norris and Piastri, with the two McLaren drivers very closely behind the Red Bull driver of Max Verstappen. The bottom five consisting of Lance Stroll, Jack Doohan, Nico Hulkenberg, Esteban Ocon, and Gabriel Bortoleto. Let's talk about the Salvers. I think. Are they really picking up from where they left off last season? Poor qualifying, just absolutely nowhere to be seen. Australia can be seen as a bit of a fluke, and they're going to be kind of lingering near the bottom. Bortoleto, his first I think the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix qualifying in 20th was the first time he started at the back of the grid. Nico Hulkenberg not doing much better in 18th. Is normality resumed really for Sauber?
Yes and no. I don't think they're as bad as they were last season. Maybe because they've got a better drive. They've got a better number one driver in Nico Hulkenberg. But I do still think they've got the slowest car. I think that's quite clear to see, and they will struggle this season, of course. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as bad as last season, though.
Talking of a bit of a shock, we obviously talked about the Hatters very highly, praised them a lot. Esteban Ocon, I believe it's yet another. Actually, I want to just confirm it in my notes. Yes, it's yet another session where he's been out qualified by Ollie Behrman. Obviously, in Bahrain, Esteban Ocon made it through to Q2, but when it came to Japan, Behrman made it through to Q3. Ocon out-qualified by his inexperienced teammate once again. Ollie Behrman going through to Q2. Esteban Ocon being knocked out in 19th. What have you made of the two Haas seasons? That you could contrast them in qualifying to complete polar opposites in a sense, but when it comes to the races, I think Esteban Ocon really comes alive, and we've seen that with his points finish in China and in other races as well.
Yeah, I think qualifying isn't their strongest point. I think that's fair to say. I think that Behrman has impressed me this season. I think Ocon maybe still is acclimatizing. He's put in some very, very good performances, which you would expect for someone like Esteban Ocon. But there's been a couple races where he's been completely outperformed by Ollie Behrman, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. So it's been a very up and down season for both of them.
And then obviously rounding off Q1 was Jack Doohan in 17th and Lance Stroll in 16th. The lesser said about kind of Lance Stroll the better, because I think it could be said that kind of normality resumed. I even want to say something.
I've brought some receipts. So
Okay. When I want to cut a segment short, this guy wants to speak and wants to bring up receipts. So, if this stat is about Lance Stroll being about his Q1 stat, then I know exactly the receipts that you're bringing up.
yes, so Lance Stroll now has the most Q1 exits in F1 history. And he came out in his press conference afterwards and said that if the McLaren drivers were in Saubers for 10 years, they too would have the most Q1 exits in history. First of all, this is Lance Stroll's ninth season in Formula One. He's not been in the sport 10 years. This season, so let's go back to the start. In 2017, he was driving for Williams. They finished fifth in the constructors. 2018, they finished 10th. That is the only season that the team he has been driving for has finished last in the constructors. In 2019, when he went to Force India at the time, they finished 7th. 2020, they finished 4th, and we all know that they should have finished 3rd. 2021, Aston Martin finished 7th, as they did in 2022 as well. In 2023, they finished 5th, when realistically they should have finished 3rd. In 2024, they finished 5th, and in 2025 so far, they are in 7th. So one season out of his 9 years in Formula One, they've been in the bottom three. His car has finished in the bottom three. Q1 exits, Lance Stroll, 75. Lance Stroll's teammates, 46. So that's 29 more Q1 exits for Stroll than for his teammates since he came into the sport. 16 of those Q1 exits were Sergei Sorokin in 2018. So if you take that out, and I do think that was the only year that Lance Stroll has had less Q1 exits than his teammate. So I think there was 15 for Stroll, 16 for Sorokin. So that is still 60 to 30. So he is getting knocked out in Q1 twice as much as his teammates. It's embarrassing, really. It really is. We said it time and time again. He is not to the standard of sport, and he comes out with baseless, excuses and reasoning for this. When the truth is far from it. He has had the 5th or better car in 4 seasons out of his 8 full seasons in Formula One. So that is in the top half of the grid. And yet he's got the most Formula One exits in Q1 history. So do I need to say any more?
I think you rest your case and we move on to Q2. The top three in Q2 consisted of Lando Norris in first, Max Verstappen sandwiched between the two McLarens in second, and Piastri in third. The bottom five consisted of Alexander Albon, Liam Lawson, Fernando Alonso, Isaac Hadjar, and Ollie Behrman. Ollie Behrman didn't really have the pace to get himself into Q3, and kind of he stated that as well after qualifying. Isaac Hadjar an impressive 14th. Fernando Alonso again, I think he came out in his presser and he said that the Aston Martin pace is nowhere kind of near the points. But let's talk about Liam Lawson. A bit of a light-hearted one this time because he's finally been able to have that little bit of reset, in qualifying, and he's able to out-qualify his rookie teammate. Yes, rookie teammate Isaac Hadjar. We know Isaac Hadjar's been a bit on flames. Let's be realistic. So for Liam Lawson to kind of have this little bit of a break, little bit of respite away from all the criticism, I think it's only going to bode well for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is the type of weekend that Liam Lawson needed. It was steady. It was very steady. It was a good performance. He didn't set the world alight, but he was matching his teammate in every single session. So I think you've got to say that this is a step in the right direction for Liam Lawson. Hopefully, he can build a bit of confidence, and then in Miami, he can take another step forward.
Let's just round off Q2 talking about Alex Albon because I think it might be the first time that Carlos Sainz has out-qualified Alex Albon. Or am I wrong? Or am I speaking wrong? Was it no, Bahrain? Okay, Bahrain was another anomaly. It's the second week running. In a matter of fact, that Alex Albon has been out qualified by Carlos Sainz, and Carlos Sainz is qualifying well in Q3, as we'll get onto in a moment. Little bit of a wobble in qualifying for Alex, or is it just Carlos Sainz finally getting up to speed and finally getting his qualifying performances up there?
I think it's the latter. I think, this is the type of performance we expect from Carlos Sainz. Well, he's actually exceeded it, really. He's finished 6th. And let's not forget that Alex Albon was only 7 thousandths of a second from qualifying into Q3. So there's not a big gap there. That is just unlucky for Alex Albon. That is now 2 races in a row he's not got into Q3. But it's a positive that Carlos Sainz appears to be now up to speed. They said it would take about 5 races. This is the 5th race of the season. So a sixth place qualification, and then obviously what happened in the race as well. Good news for Carlos Sainz and then Alex Albon. It's an interesting battle. Let's see how it develops over the rest of the season. But this is a very exciting battle between two closely matched teammates.
And on to Q3. And the Max Verstappen effect was out again. The guy's a joke. It's just beyond stupid how he does it. You're thinking one moment George Russell's got it. You're thinking another moment Oscar Piastri's just took away provisional pole position, and then this guy in the fourth quickest car just comes out of absolutely nowhere and just steals pole position. I've got no words. I really don't.
Yeah, it is unbelievable. The guy continues to out-deliver his machinery. They look to be absolutely nowhere in practice, and then he does something special in qualifying. There's a reason he's performed as well as he has this season. I think a lot of people counted him out, but it goes to show, doesn't it?
And actually, let's talk about Charles Leclerc. We've not talked about Charles Leclerc. P4 in qualifying. I think it's a much needed positive kind of result for Ferrari. I think in the opening four races, everybody was just had Ferrari completely, bin bags on heads, and heads were down, and there wasn't much hype about it. But Charles actually was able to deliver something, something positive, something good for Ferrari fans. Do you think that? Obviously, we'll talk about his performance in the race in just a moment. But do you think that Ferrari fans can be slightly more optimistic that he was able to, get a top five finish and in qualifying and in the race? And do you think that, or or do I say the dreaded line? Was it a one-off?
I don't think it was a one-off because if you look at his last three qualifying results, his fourth, second, fourth. So I think there's positives to take. I don't think Ferrari are in the mix for wins. I just don't think that's where they're at the minute. But if they can hone in and really perfect what they've got at the minute and then bring some upgrades on top of that, then they can. It's there's not a big margin. I think McLaren is obviously the quickest. Red Bull, when they get everything right, are in the mix with Verstappen. And then Russell is always just off, it seems like, from those three. If those three are get everything right, then Russell is usually just off. And then the Ferrari this season has been behind those. So they've been fighting for fifth, really. But if they can start to perfect what they've got, then they can be fighting for podiums on a regular basis. And then, if they bring in free upgrades, why can't they be fighting for more?
So the order in Q3 was Verstappen on pole, with Oscar Piastri lining up alongside the Red Bull driver in second. George Russell and Charles Leclerc teamed up together on the second row, with Kimi Antonelli an impressive fifth, Carlos Sainz in sixth. Lewis Hamilton shared row four with Yuki Tsunoda, the Ferrari and Red Bull driver, in seventh and eighth. And then another impressive qualifying for Pierre Gasly in ninth and Lando Norris in 10th. Before we end off our qualifying segment, let's talk about Lando Norris, because he brought out red flags with a crash into the barrier, um, pushing it very, very hard, pushing his luck completely as well. Um, it was shown actually side by side on Sky F1. His and Oscar Piastri's line heading into, I believe it, let me think, turn one, two, I think it's turn three. I think it's turn three or turn four. Yeah, turn four. Um, and you can see the entry lines between Oscar Piastri kind of being quite tight, and Lando Norris being quite a long way away from the barrier, which kind of saw him understeer and oversteer and saw him into the barrier. It's another Lando Norris mistake, and it seems to be, the recurring meme of Lando Norris being in a championship battle and him just getting slammed by like a pan in the face or something, and something bad happens. It's happened again, and is it just Lando Norris once again? When he gets the sort of reporter's curse at being talked about a championship battle, it's just his luck is out at the moment by the looks of things.
These are the mistakes that cost you a world championship. It's enough said. Realistically, he doesn't qualify outside the top four if he completes qualifying, and then he's fighting for podiums and a victory. As it is, qualifying is costing. His recovery drive was good, not exceptional, but good. but it wasn't enough. He's lost 13 points to his championship challenger, and another 6 points to the reigning four-time world champion. So these are the type of mistakes that cost you a world championship when you're fighting for one.
And I feel like we should be, responsible for it as well because I believe we said that it might have been, I can't remember which race it was. It might have been Japan, but we said that, or it might have been the last race in Bahrain. Anyway, I digress. It was one of the races where we said that that was the only mistake that he could make during that obviously this championship season, and he's made yet another one, and you know we can be responsible for it because we kind of said it that he can only make one, and he's making one after another. But Lando Norris potentially in his own head. We'll have to wait and see how he recovers in a week's time when we go to Miami, where it was obviously his first race victory ever this time last year. But let's move on to our average driver ratings. So kicking things off, Oscar Piastri qualified in second, finished first. 10 out of 10, I think. I think obviously the lap one incident with Max, yeah, he was fully alongside and ahead. And Max was just not giving up that corner at all. Let's be real. What kind of transpired with Max getting a 5 second penalty instead of a 10 second penalty is fair because it was a lap one incident. And like the FIA said, if it was anywhere down the line, really, in the race, it would have been a 10 second, which I find fair. It's fair enough. Max wasn't at any point wanting to, give the advantage back and let Oscar Piastri overtake him, which is fair enough. And he got slapped on the wrist with a 5 second penalty. But talking about Oscar Piastri, very good in qualifying, race pace fantastic, kind of, was in his groove. Then Max pitted, got the race lead back and just kind of cruised from there. So yeah, 10 out of 10 from me.
Yeah, I've gone for a 9 out of 10 just because obviously that one incident is not his fault at all. It is Max Verstappen. He's got full entitlement to take the corner. Verstappen's trying to go around the outside and he is not. He doesn't have the right to demand space. Piastri is ahead at the apex, got better launch from second place. The only reason I've gone for a 9 and not a 10 is because he wasn't as comfortable as he was in Bahrain or in China, for example. I think they were 10 out of 10 performances. This was slightly below that. But, third win of the season, 3 wins from 5 races. And he's really put that mistake in Australia behind him. He now leads the championship, as we said. The most impressive thing about Piastri is he doesn't seem phased. He doesn't seem phased by anything. And that is such an important quality when you're fighting for a championship. So I think if he keeps it up, then, it could be a very special season for him. I think he is. I think he's the favourite for the title. I know we're only 5 races in, but based on how they're driving, the mistakes they're making, and just the raw speed, I think Piastri is the full package at the moment, and I think Norris is going to struggle to beat him over the course of the season.
Onto the Max Verstappen effect. Qualified in first, finished second. Obviously, I'm not going to digress regarding the penalty situation because I've already said it regarding Piastri. So basically, same applies. But I've gone one step lower than Oscar Piastri. I've given Max a 9. Still a fantastic performance, and it just goes to show that it doesn't matter how slow or how quick his car is. He's always competing at the front end, no matter what. And he's obviously put a few points over on Lando Norris, who he was competing for the championship lead. Now he's got his eyes firmly having to set his eyes firmly on Oscar Piastri. But yeah, it's another good drive and another good performance. Just kind of it's the light is a little bit dimmed away from Max Verstappen purely because of the lap one chaos and Max being Max and just wanting to have the race lead no matter what. So the light is kind of dimmed, but yet again, it was a great performance from Max Verstappen.
Yeah, completely agree. 9 out of 10. Like we said, the lap one incident is his fault. He shouldn't have gone for the move. Well, he's always going to go for that move. but he should have had the awareness to know that he was going to get that penalty. But I do wonder whether he just didn't care, whether he thought it was more important to get the penalty and to build the gap to keep Piastri behind, because you could argue that if Piastri was in front of him, that gap would have been a lot bigger. So there's two ways of looking at it. Hopefully build the gap, because we set, like Piastri was saying on the radio, if you're within 3 seconds of the car in front, then you're struggling with a dirty air. So maybe that's a bit of thinking from Verstappen. He just thought he had to get ahead by any means necessary. But it was a very, very strong race, very strong display, and that's why I think he deserves a 9 out of 10 as well.
Ah, on to third place. Charles Leclerc, first podium, first Grand Prix podium of the season. We've already had this debate, with Lewis Hamilton obviously winning the sprint. Um, Ethan likes to shake his head because he's very much a Lewis Hamilton fan, and I'm very much a Charles Leclerc fan. And you know, I still value Lewis Hamilton's sprint victory. Don't get me wrong, I still value it as a podium, but I'll always say a proper podium is when you get it in a Grand Prix. And Charles Leclerc delivered that for Ferrari this weekend, finishing P3 after qualifying fourth. And you know what? I'm happy giving this guy a 10 out of 10 because I think he deserves it. Lando Norris was on the charge and absolutely hunting him down. Charles Leclerc could have finished where Lewis Hamilton finished in seventh. He could have fallen down like a stone. Could have been overtaken by obviously the likes of George Russell and the likes of Kimi Antonelli when obviously they were challenging, and it could have dropped like a stone, but he didn't. He rose to it, made his strategy work like a trait. Finished P3, fended off Lando Norris. Jobs are good, and podium for Ferrari, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I completely agree. 10 out of 10 for me as well. It was a very good strategy from Ferrari. I think Leclerc done very well to look after his tyres in the first stint, and then when everybody in front of him pit, he was able to really extend the gap.
The thing is, this feels like the first time we're talking about Ferrari having a good strategy. And you know what? I'll actually give you another fact of the day because as we're talking about Ferrari strategies, Ferrari have had the fastest pit stop all 5 rounds this season so far, start of the day.
There you go, start of the day. I don't think it's actually their first good strategy of the season. I think that Bahrain was on course to be the exact same, but obviously the safety car was unfortunate timing, and it didn't ruin their strategy, but it took the wind out of their sails a bit. I think they could have got a podium last week in Bahrain as well. But yeah, Leclerc done fantastic. Keeping those mediums alive. It meant that he was doing less laps on the hard, so he was able to push more the tyre. And I did think that Norris was going to get him, especially because he was only 5 seconds behind him after he came out. But the way that he held him at arm's length, Norris didn't get DRS on him either. That was very, very impressive. And it was a well-deserved podium. I think it's a long time coming, and hopefully this is a sign of things to come for Ferrari. But let's wait and see.
And now you've completely jinxed Ferrari for the rest of the season. Thank you, Ethan Evans. On to Lando Norris, who qualified in P10 and finished in fourth. Gained 6 places on his way to finishing just outside the podium places. I've given Lando a 7 out of 10. I can see this going two ways from your perspective, Ethan. You can see it as he shouldn't be in this place and he should be fighting for the race victory, and it should be kind of a routine back to Lando Norris time, and kind of him being able to be out in front with his teammate, and you're probably giving him something like a 6. But I've given Lando a 7. I think it was a good performance to kind of claw back from what happened on the Saturday. Obviously able to get all their moves done and get himself very close to the podium places. It's a good performance, but not what we've expected of Lando Norris. I think his expectations are very high, and everybody else's expectations at McLaren are very high. He's just not been able to deliver the goods as of yet, as of recently, should I say?
No, I was debating between a 6 and a 7, but I've gone for a 7 as well. Like we said, he should be competing for the victory in this weekend. Pace was there on the car. There's no reason why he shouldn't have been. The reason he hasn't is because of his own mistake. like I said, even if he just completes his lap, he finishes P4 at a minimum, you think, then he is in a position to fight for the victory. But as it is, he ruined his race before it started with that crash in qualifying, not having a banker lap on the board either. So disappointing for him, and I think that it's more points drops. I still think he should be getting a podium from that position. The Ferrari isn't anywhere near as quick as the McLaren. So I think that from the position he was in, he should be finishing third. But he was within 10 seconds of Piastri, so it was a good recovery drive. But yeah, it's a disappointing result for him, and it comes off the back of perhaps another disappointing result, not able to fight for the victory again in Bahrain. So I think he might need the week's break that's coming up. I think it might be good for him to reset.
On to the two Mercedes drivers, I'm going to group them together because they finished side by side. Well, not side by side, but one place after another on the road. George Russell in fifth and Kimi Antonelli in sixth. Uh, George Russell qualified in third. Kimi Antonelli qualified in fifth. Only dropped, George Russell dropped a couple of places. Antonelli just the one. I've given both of them an 8 out of 10. I think that their qualifying performances, they've been impressive. But obviously you're expecting them to be overtaken by Lando Norris charging through the pack. And then obviously for Charles Leclerc to keep him, uh, for obviously the obviously George Russell especially to kind of keep him at bay during the first stint, but then obviously get absolutely gazumped because of a tyre offset. Could be played because of Mercedes strategy being not in the favour of George Russell there with a tyre offset. But still a very good race pace from the two Mercedes drivers. Just they just weren't, didn't have the exact optimum strategy like the Ferrari did to fight for a podium.
I've gone for a 7 out of 10 for both of them. I thought it was good, but not great, if that makes sense. I think for Russell, he done very well in qualifying to get himself up in third, and then was holding pace with them on in the first stint and the start of the second stint as well. But then I think maybe he pushed a bit too hard on those tyres and they just fell off the cliff. Antonelli, on the other hand, he had a very steady race. So I think a 7 is right. I don't think maybe the gap between them at the end is very representative because I think Russell was a lot quicker than that gap represents, but the tyres just fell off. He knew he was comfortable in fourth, sorry, fifth, and yeah, then it didn't really wasn't really pushing as much as Antonelli, who at one stage looked like he could have been overtaken by Hamilton. Hamilton was close an 8 second gap to about a second, but then fell away himself. So a good first few races for Antonelli. So I've gone for a 7, and the same for Russell.
On to Mr. Lewis Hamilton, qualified seventh, finished seventh. I've gone with a 7. I think that he said he said it himself in the media pen after the race. Clearly, the Ferrari do have what it takes to get a podium if Scholl can get there. He's just unable, to sort of acclimatize himself, if that's the word that we want to go with the Ferrari. It seems to me that Lewis Hamilton has had troubles with his first 5 rounds of a season. He's just not able to get on top of the Ferrari at all, and it's just not giving him anything. Whether it's front end grip, whether it's rear grip, everything just during the race just seemed to be out the window for Lewis Hamilton. And it's it's no mean feat to obviously be the only driver inside the top 10 to not have gained a place or not have lost a place in the race. He was just consistent. He was obviously trying to get up to sixth past Antonelli, just couldn't make it, and then just fell away, and just kind of had a steady race. It's what I think Lewis Hamilton has been so far this season, just steady, just I don't think he's been pushing it as much as Charles Leclerc, in a sense. It's just been steady. And I think it's the way that Lewis Hamilton is trying to bed himself into the team, just trying to be steady and trying to not cause any damage on the car or anything like that. So yeah, P7 in qualifying, P7 in the race, 7 out of 10.
I've gone for a 6 out of 10. I think it was a disappointing one for Lewis Hamilton. Yeah, I don't think he's gelled with the car yet. I think he needs to find maybe the balance. Maybe it's a setup, something that suits him. And then we'll start to see the real Lewis Hamilton. But I think for now, for the time being, he isn't at that pace. Maybe it is still acclimatized into the Ferrari and the team. Obviously, Leclerc's been in the team for several years now, and he's well built into that team. He's a fundamental part, and that's kind of where Hamilton needs to get. I don't think the week's break will hurt him at all. Hopefully come back at it with a fresh set of with a fresh way of looking, and he can really have a good go at Miami. I also don't think Jeddah is necessarily his best track. We've seen him struggle there a few times, so maybe it's a combination of both. He just wasn't able to get the performance. But like you said, he was gaining on Antonelli. I think he could have made that overtake. Maybe he took a bit too much of his tyres, but I don't really know what the answer is at this point. I do think that he needs to find something. He needs to find a different way of going about it. But there is optimism there to be had.
On to P8 and P9 with the two Williams drivers, Carlos Sainz finishing ahead of Alex Albon. Can we say just tremendous teamwork when it came to those two in the closing stages? Sainz giving Albon DRS so he can keep Isaac Hadjar, who finished 10th, away from him. It's hard for me because these for Carlos it could be a 10 because of his qualifying and his race, and it's his. I think it's his first kind of points finish, disregarding the disqualification that happened to the two Ferraris in Japan. But I've settled for 2 9s for the Williams drivers. I think they both had very, very good races. Alex making positions, obviously Carlos losing 2 places, but I think both of them were there and, kind of comfortably in the points. Just had to fend off Isaac Hadjar in the closing stages, but they both drove a very tremendous race. And once again, the resurgence of Williams, I think, is well and truly on. So both of them, from myself, received a 9 out of 10.
I've gone for a 9 out of 10 for Carlos Sainz. I thought it was an exceptional performance. Like I said, he is now getting into that car. He's used to it, and this was a fantastic performance. I've gone for an 8 out of 10 for Alex Albon. I don't think he was on the pace of his teammate. I thought he'd done well to make up the positions, but it was clear to me that the only reason he was so close to Sainz was because Sainz was told to let him have the DRS to pave off of Hadjar. I think Hadjar would have easily overtaken Albon had they not been working together. Whether he would have overtaken Sainz as well, I'm not too sure. But it's clear from that last lap that Sainz took out a 2 second gap on Albon in one lap. So who knows what would have happened over sort of 15 laps had he been able to push and didn't have to basically tow Albon along a little bit. So yeah, 9 out of 10 for Sainz. Fantastic performance, and then slightly lower for Albon with an 8 out of 10. Still a very good drive, 2 valuable points. Williams look a real good team at the minute.
Rounding off the top 10 of the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix was Isaac Hadjar, who qualified 14th and finished 10th in the race. I've given another driver a 9 out of 10. Isaac Hadjar has been well and truly on flames. Another points finish for the rookie driver. And it could have. He said it himself. He was surprised that he managed to get his RB into the points, but was disappointed that he wasn't able to get more points because the opportunity for even higher points positions were there. He obviously had Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz in very close proximity to himself. I've gone with a 9 out of 10. Another fantastic performance from the RB driver. More points in the bag, and he's I mean, we talked about Liam Lawson highly in qualifying that he outshone his rookie teammate, but the rookie teammate outshone him in the race, and that's where the points are paid. So, Isaac Hajar gets another one up on Liam Lawson. It's yet another fantastic performance from a Frenchman.
Yeah, I agree. I've gone for 9 out of 10 as well. I think he's very unlucky the fact he couldn't get more points. Like I said, I think he was clearly quicker than at least Albon, possibly Sainz as well. So it could have been another eighth place finish for him. But yeah, tremendous performance and a very good strategy from RB as well to put him on the hards and then to let him attack at the end on the mediums, work to treat. And yeah, another points finish for him. So a step in the right direction, but it just he couldn't make the overtakes because of some good teamwork from Williams.
On to just the places just outside the points. Fernando Alonso up next, qualified 13th, finished 11th in the race. I've gone with a 7 out of 10. I think it's one of the better Fernando Alonso performances this season. But then again, it looks like Aston Martin are struggling a lot, a hell of a lot, and I think that Fernando Alonso is hoping this season is well and truly over, so 2026 can happen like this, and Adrian Newey can be in the building and he can build him a rocket ship. Um, but for me, the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix didn't go badly for Fernando Alonso. I just think that the 10 cars in front of him were just quicker than him, unfortunately. So yeah, it's a 7 out of 10. It's a good performance, but just not points worthy.
Yeah, agree again. 7 out of 10 for me for Fernando Alonso. Very good performance. And you can tell that he's driving to a good level. It's just that raw speed in the car isn't there as it has been over the last couple of years. So this might have been last season. This might have been like a fifth or a sixth place. You never know, especially at this stage in the early stages of the season. But the pace just isn't there in the car, and but it's still a 7 out of 10 performance. I think he done really well. But yeah, it's unfortunate that he's not able to fight for any points at the minute.
On to Liam Lawson, who qualified 12th and finished in 12th. One of only two drivers not to gain or lose a place in the race alongside Lewis Hamilton. I've also gone with a 7. I think it was a steady race for Liam Lawson. It's obviously yet again it's a similar fate to Fernando Alonso where he just was not able to fight for the points. He was able to obviously be there or thereabouts with Fernando Alonso, Ollie Behrman, that sort of gaggle of cars, but he was just not able to push it and kind of get alongside his teammate to fight for the points. So it's one of the better performances for Liam Lawson this season. I think he can take a little bit of heart from the Saudi Arabian performance. But like I mentioned in when I was talking about Isaac Hajar, Isaac's kind of one upped him again in the race, and it doesn't look pretty. But then again, he's got a week off, similar to the likes of Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton to kind of reset and refocus and potentially get his mojo back once again.
Yeah, agreed. 7 out of 10 as well. A step in the right direction for Lawson. Maybe he's getting a handle on the car a little bit better, but it's good to see that he's now putting in a good performance. I think he's very unlucky with the penalty. He's obviously finished behind Hadjar on track, like right on his rear wing. The overtake is done halfway down the straight. This is what I don't get, especially when you compare it to the Max Verstappen penalty when he got 5 seconds. And I get the reasoning for the fact it's only 5 seconds, it obviously being a lap one incident. But if you just take the decisions in principle, you watch the overtake from Max Verstappen, he gets 5 seconds for that. You watch Liam Lawson, he gets 10 seconds. I think it's more of a track limits violation than a penalty because I don't think he's gained an advantage. The overtake is done. Doohan is nowhere near him. And then Lawson just happens to lock his tyres on the same corner. I don't think he's gained any advantage by that. It's not caused him to overtake. So 10 seconds is very, very harsh. And he almost pulled that gap on Alonso as well. I think it was like 8.8 seconds or something like that. So a good performance from Lawson. I don't want that to spoil it because it was a good performance. And he wasn't far off the points.
Wasn't far off the points, was it not for that penalty? Of course. And it's yet another penalty. He's kind of following a nice little trend in Bahrain. He got a few in Saudi. He got one as well. Can we see one in Miami? Maybe, maybe not. Make it the three-peat. On to Ollie Behrman, who qualified 15th and finished 13th. Yeah, again, I've gone with a seven. I think not obviously the Ollie Behrman we saw in Saudi Arabia this time last season, where he stepped in the Ferrari and drove it into the points. Um, it's a little bit of a different Ollie Behrman. He had a bit of a struggle here and there, and um, he was on a completely different strategy to Esteban Ocon, which saw the Haas guys flip the cars. He's absolutely wiped Esteban Ocon along the floor. With the amount of time that that he bridged between him and Ocon after they switched positions and when the checkered flag came out. It's another good performance, but again, he's another driver that said that points went on the cards. The car just wasn't there for him to be able to fight for points, and he did a good enough job to kind of be there in with a shout of the points, but just miss out once again.
Yeah, unfortunate for him. I don't think points were within Haas's reach this weekend. It's a 6 out of 10 from me. I thought it was a very solid drive, but you can't really give him any higher. But he doesn't deserve any lower. I think it's a fair grade. But like you said, he wiped the floor with Ocon. I think it was a 25-second gap in the end, and fully deserves all the plaudits he's got so far this season.
Onto his teammate Esteban Ocon, who qualified 19th and finished 14th. I've gone with a six, and I know that you're going to go with a five because that's usually the case. When we do these average ratings, they usually go one grade lower for the teammate. I've gone with a six because I gave Behrman a seven. Um, yeah, just a little bit of a lonely race for Esteban Ocon. Was fighting in the lower pack, and kind of emerged as the victor of a lower pack battle in 14th. Yeah, just nowhere compared to his teammate, compared to his rookie teammate. May I point out as well? And it kind of follows the trend of Esteban Ocon, kind of being like a yo-yo. He's up, then he's down. He's up, then he's down. He's up, then he's down. And right now, uh, after Saudi Arabia, he's down. But then again, in Miami, he'll probably turn up once again and be up in the points and stuff like that. But I've gone with a six for Esteban Ocon, kind of a bit of an average race, and just didn't click into place for him, especially after a very poor qualifying from himself.
Yep, I have gone with a five. Yeah, like you said, I think we both agree that Behrman deserves a higher grade. But you've gone for a seven, I've gone for a six, so that means I have to go for a five for Esteban Ocon. Yeah, the fact that Behrman's put 25 seconds on him is not a good look at all. It's another poor qualifying, which is becoming a bit of a theme. He's only got two Q2 appearances this season, Esteban Ocon. And he's qualifying on the last row here in Saudi, which is not good at all. I think the Haas does have pretty good race trim though, so he was able to make up a few positions. Obviously, he gained a couple of positions right at the start anyway with that crash. But yeah, not a race to remember for Esteban Ocon. But like you said, he's going up and down at the minute, so maybe he'll get an eight or a nine for Miami. We'll wait and see.
It will definitely happen. But then again, we've probably just cursed him, as we have cursed a few drivers on this podcast in recent weeks. On to Nico Hulkenberg, who qualified 18th and finished 15th. Yeah, I've gone with a six. I think obviously better of the two Saubers. I don't think he can add much more than that. I think the three drivers that finished behind him, he can, kind of deservedly finished behind him because of how slow they are. Yeah, Nico Hulkenberg. Did Nico Hulkenberg get lapped? Was he what? Did he get lapped? I'm trying to think whether he got lapped or not because I think obviously the three that will follow after him, Stroll, Doohan, Bortoleto, definitely got lapped. I just can't remember whether Hulkenberg got lapped or not. But I've given him a six. He was better of the two Sauber drivers, but again, very anonymous.
Yeah, I've gone for a six as well. I think that it was decent actually. I don't think that Selma is anything special. As I said earlier, I think it's still the worst car on the grid, but it is good to see that Nico Hulkenberg is still there. I think give him a better car and he'll be fighting for points. I just don't think that's within the realms of possibility at the minute, which is a shame to see because he's obviously a fantastic driver, as we were saying last season. Maybe reality's hitting after a brilliant race in Australia. But yeah, it's not where he wants to be. But he is showing that he's a lot of his teammate.
And just to round off all the race finishes, I'm going to round off the two. The three. I'm not going to call them numpties because that's bad. The three brick car drivers at the back. So Lance Stroll qualified 16th, finished 16th, five. Jack Doohan qualified 17th, finished 17th, five. Bortoleto qualified 20th, finished 18th. I've actually given him a four purely on the basis of I can't remember who it was. I think it was Liam Lawson and Fernando Alonso. I'm trying to jog my memory back. That they were the two of them were making moves on Gabriel Bortoleto down the start finish straight. One was able to get past. Bortoleto almost put Fernando Alonso in the wall. Um, Completely not watching what he was doing. And let's not point out Fernando Alonso is Gabriel Bortoletto's mentor. So it could have been very, very awkward between the two of them. But definitely not a race to remember for Gabriel Bortoletto, especially after qualifying 20th and qualifying on the back of a grid for the first time in his F1 career. So yeah, just to round up, Stroll five, doing five, Bortoletto four.
So for me, I've gone for Lance Stroll. I've gone for a 4 out of 10. He was about 30 seconds behind his teammate, which is not good enough. We've already spoken about his qualifying antics. And yeah, poor in qualifying, poor in the race, absolutely nowhere. Jack Doohan, I've actually gone for a 3 out of 10. That Alpine is not a bad car, and the fact he's finishing 17th is simply not good enough. His teammate qualified in ninth. I know he didn't finish, or we don't know where he would have finished. I imagine he'll be fighting for points. So the fact he's been lapped, he's finished probably about 45 seconds off the off the points places is not good enough. And I do want him to succeed in Formula One. I do want him to at least see out the season, which has been a highly talked about topic. With performances like that, he's not going to. He needs to be doing a hell of a lot better to keep his seat, and it's simply not good enough. And then for Bortoleto, I've gone for a 4 out of 10 as well. I think that it was slightly below average. You think 5 out of 10 is your average grade. I think that it was slightly below par, slightly below where he should have been. And yeah, he almost sent his teammate into the wall. Or sorry, he almost sent his manager into the wall, which isn't a good look. He just got completely blindsided and wasn't really paying enough attention. So it's a 4 out of 10 for that.
On to the two non-race finishers. Lastly, Yuki Tsunoda, Pierre Gasly qualified in P8 for Tsunoda and P9 for Gasly. Both retired. I've gone with two sixes. Obviously, you can't really judge too much of what they could have done. Um, and I do see that crash as a bit of a racing incident. I think, the incident between the two of them can be seen plenty of ways, but I think they're both, kind of allowed to scrap in a sense. But Saudi Arabia is just so costly that if you make one mistake, or if a driver in front of you makes one mistake, both of you are ending up at the barrier, and both of them did. So yeah, I've gone for 6 out of 10 for both of the drivers.
Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, like you said, I think it is a racing incident as well. I do think if I had to put blame, I actually think it's more on Tsunoda than Gasly, because I think he has slightly understeered into Gasly, but that's, heavy car, cold tires, that's always going to happen. Slight understeer there. But it is as plain as day a racing incident. And I'm glad that no penalties were given out for that because it would have been completely unfair. But yeah, like we've said, it's unfortunate for the both of them. But 6 out of 10 because I think they both put in decent qualifying performances as well. Sonoda obviously qualifying eighth, Gasly ninth. So they were above average in qualifying, and like you can't really grade their race because it lasted about 4 corners. So yeah, 6 out of 10 for the pair of them.
And that rounds off episode 13 of On the Grid Podcast, our Saudi Arabian Grand Prix review. Um, obviously, we've not got a race for a week, so we'll be back next week, um, previewing the Miami Grand Prix sprint weekend, reviewing all the news that comes along the way, and looking back at Formula 2 and Formula 3 whilst they're off for a little while. So thank you for listening. We'll be back next week. We'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye.